Veldt, also spelled Veldt, is a type of wide-open rural landscape in southern Africa. Particularly, it is a flat area covered in grass or low scrub, especially in the countries of South Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia. A certain subtropical woodland ecoregion of southern Africa has been officially defined as the Bushveld by the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Trees are found only in a few places. Frost, fire, and grazing animals allow grass to grow but prevent the growth of trees. Etymology. The word Veldt comes from the Afrikaans word for field. The etymological origin is Older Dutch Veldt, a spelling that the Dutch abandoned in favor of Veldt during the 19th century, decades before the first Afrikaans dictionary. Subsequent addition of the terminal t in the spelling Veldt seems to have been mainly an English confusion with the already obsolete Dutch usage. It never was an Afrikaans form. Climate. The climate of the Veldt is highly variable, but its general pattern is mild winters from May to September and very hot summers from November to March, with moderate considerable variations in daily temperatures and abundant sunshine. Precipitation mostly occurs in the summer months in the form of high-energy thunderstorms. Over most of the South African High Veld, the average annual rainfall is between 15 and 30 inches, decreasing to about 10 inches near the western border and increasing to nearly 40 inches in some parts of the Lesotho Highlands. The South African Low Veld generally receives more precipitation than the High Veld. Temperature is closely related to elevation. In general, the mean July temperatures range between 45 degrees Fahrenheit in the Lesotho Highlands and 60 degrees Fahrenheit in the Low Veld. January temperatures range between 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. In Zimbabwe, the precipitation averages around 30 to 35 inches on the High Veld, dropping to less than 15 inches in the lowest areas of the Low Veld. Temperatures are slightly higher than in South Africa. Over the entire Veldt, seasonal and annual average rainfall variations of up to 40% are common. Damaging drought affects at least half the area about once every 3 or 4 years. It reduces plant and animal biomass to sustainable levels. Again, everywhere the average number of hours of annual sunshine varies from 60 to 80% of the total amount possible. Definitions. Veldt can be loosely compared to the Australian terms outback or the bush, to the prairie of North America, to the pampas lowlands of South America, or to the steppe of Central Asia. Someone from Yorkshire might equate wandering across the moors to walking through the Veldt. By extension, the Veldt can be compared to the boondocks, or those places beyond the Black Stump in Australia. There is a sense in which it refers in essence to unimproved land and does not include areas used both for pastoral activities and the planting of crops. These areas are referred to as fields. The word is less appropriate for land that is heavily forested, mountainous, or urban. The simplest explanation will be to say the word Veldt means natural vegetation, excluding vegetation like swamps and forests. It does include mountains with vegetation but not deserts or mountains without natural vegetation. The Veldt definition may encompass different natural environments, both humid and dry, such as coastal plain, coastal prairie, flooded grasslands and savannas, grassland, prairie, savanna, steppe meadow, water meadow, flood meadow, wet meadow, as well as agricultural fields. Whereas mountainous peaks and thick forests do not really fit in with the term Veldt, bushes are acceptable. The area then becomes Bosveld, a term that is used mainly to describe Bosveld. which is both loose botanical classification and a specific geographical part of what used to be known as the Transvaal, as described for example in the story Schoch of the Bushveld. Other uses the word Veldt, rhinoceros field, is now used to differentiate one of the major vegetation types of the Cape Floristic region, a carefully husbanded sports field on which the game of rugby is played in the middle of cities such as Cape Town or Johannesburg is referred to as a rugbyveld in the Afrikaans language. The word Veldt also carries military connotations. The word field in English has a strong association with war, as evidenced by the expression "the first foe in the field" and the lines of the ballad Lord Marlborough, "You generals all and champions bold, that takes delight in field, that knocks down churches and castle walls, but now to death must yield." The same relationship is paralleled in Afrikaans. Just as the English army has its field marshals, the Boer armies had the Veld cornets and Veldt commandos. High Veld and Low Veld. High Veld. Much of the interior of southern Africa consists of a high plateau, the higher portions 1,500 to 2,100 meters of which are known as the High Veld, starting at the Drakensberg escarpment, 220 kilometers to the east of Johannesburg, and sloping gradually downwards to the west and southwest, as well as to the north, through the Bushveld towards the Limpopo River. These high, cooler areas above sea level are characterized by flat or gently undulating terrain, vast grasslands and a modified tropical or subtropical climate. To the east the High Veld's border is marked by the Great Escarpment, or the Mpumalanga Drakensberg, but in the other directions the boundary is not obvious, and often arbitrary. The blesbok and quagga were among the large animals that once roamed on the High Veld in great numbers. Nowadays there still is a sizable population of springbok in some areas, though much of the area is devoted to commercial farming, and South Africa's largest conurbation, Lowveld, the lowlands below about 500 meters altitude, along South Africa's northern border with Botswana and Zimbabwe, where a 180-million-year-old failed rift valley cuts into southern Africa's central plateau and locally obliterates the Great Escarpment, is known as the Lowveld. The Limpopo and Save rivers run from the Central African highlands via the Lowveld into the Indian Ocean to the east. The Limpopo Lowveld extends southwards, east of the Drakensberg Escarpment through Mpumalanga province and ultimately into eastern Swaziland. This southern limb of the Lowveld is bounded by South Africa's border with Mozambique to the east, and the northeastern part of the Drakensberg to the west. This region is generally hotter and less intensely cultivated than the High Veld. Thornveld, Thornveld or Thornveld are often referred to as acacia thornveld, is a type of semi-arid savanna in which grassland with thorny acacia and certain species of thorny bushes predominate. The predominant plant species are usually different in the thornveld of the plains or in the hill thornveld, where, for example, species of genus Balanites are common. Some of the characteristic species in the thornveld include grasses, grass species belonging to genus Themeda and Hyparrhenia, trees and bushes, genus Acacia and rust such as Acacia caffra, Acacia siberiana and Rus pentheri, and other species like Ziziphus mucronata, Ereteorigia and Cussonia spicata. Sandveld and Hardveld. Sandveld, in the general sense of the word, is a type of veld characterized by dry, sandy soil, typical of certain areas of the southern African region. It usually absorbs all water from the seasonal rains, although aquatic habitats, largely seasonal, may be also found in specific places in the Sandveld. Only certain hardy plant species thrive in the Sandveld environment. These consist especially of grasses forming clumps and certain kinds of trees and shrubs. The sand veldt vegetation has a particular pattern of growth, rarely covering the whole terrain and thus leaving patches of sandy soil exposed on the surface. Some of the typical sand veldt species are Acacia hematoxylon A, Ludritzi, Boschia albitrunca, Terminalia sericea, Longcocarpus nelsi, Bauhinia petersiana and Baphia massiensis. Hard veldt is a term applied to certain areas of rocky soils in Botswana, located mostly in the eastern part of the country. The landscape is an undulating plain with scattered rocky hill ranges. There are areas of hard veldt also in South Africa in the mountainous central Kammersberg of the Northern Cape with hilly escarpments and deep river. The valleys. The soil of the hard veldt is characterized by rocky outcrops, as well as an abundance of stones and pebbles of different shapes and sizes. The flora of the hard veldt is typical of rocky savanna, with denser vegetation, and thus less denuded patches than in the sand veldt, as well as taller trees. There is also a higher diversity of species in the hard veldt compared with the sand veldt. Peltiforum africanum, Acacia nigrescens A, Tortilus, Combretum apiculatum and Colophospermum opanisum of the representative species of the northern hard veldt. See also Bushveld, outback, pasture, plain, rangeland. References external links grasslands and thickets, bush encroachment and herding in the Kalahari thorn veldt.